Hey everybody, this is Pastor Jim, one of the pastors here at the Urbana United Methodist Church. It is Monday morning, time for a little dose of Motivational Monday. Hope you had an awesome week last week. Hope you had a great weekend. Hope you watched that Ohio State-Nebraska game. OHIO. So good for the Buckeyes, and so that was awesome. And so, hey, for years, I may have shared this before, but for years, I would do these little articles when we never used email. Everything was snail mail. And we had newsletters, and they had, the note from the pastor. And I called them PJ's Ponderings. They were probably more like ramblings. I just kind of went off on a conversation, and hopefully it ended somewhere that was helpful for people. And so kind of this morning, that's what I'm doing, okay? This is Pastor Jim, PJ's Pondering/Ramblings. And what I want to focus on, is the upcoming presidential election that will be a week from tomorrow. And so hopefully if you haven't voted, you're planning to vote like my wife Tammy and I next Tuesday. And it's just, I understand the safety, and I'll have my little hand sanitizer and my mask, but there's something about that. I've used absentee balloting just once before because we really weren't going to be home on voting Tuesday. So that's just me. You're supposed to vote on that day. So that day I will vote. And so will Tammy. But many of us are taking advantage of the opportunity. So whether you are planning to vote on voting Tuesday, or you're going to mail in, do the absentee thing, just encourage you to vote and use the right we have, American citizens. So, but I just wanted to kind of talk about this crazy. Times are crazy. I can't remember the times in 2020. They kind of remind me of the late 60s and early 70s with all the protests around the Vietnam War, and it was a weird time, and the racial riots that were going on, in the South, as fortunately we fought for justice for all people, and all of that, and but I remember that being weird, and I thought, man, we got through that. Good, the weird times are over. Well, the weird times came back, and I got to thinking about all the division that's going on in our country. And I talked about this on a Sunday morning a couple weeks ago, about how we really can get along with those who think differently from us. But it just, I find it, I've never known our community, our country, our state, the neighborhoods in which we live to be as divided as they are now. And I don't have an answer for that. I just think it's not strange or odd. I just think it's unfortunate that it seems like in our culture, in our country, we've come to the point where we don't really seek first to understand, then to be understood. We're not interested in finding middle ground. We just want people to think like we think. If they don't think like we think, then, hey, boom, you can't be my friend on Facebook, and I can't be your friend in person, and so that's how it is. And I just think that's so very sad. And with that, the Christian community, there's a lot of conversation too. You're not a Christian if you vote Republican. You're not a Christian if you vote Democrat. And then the whole thing, like, was Jesus a Democrat or a Republican? And Tony Campolo came out with a book several years ago about is Jesus Republican or Democrat? And of course, the essence of that book was, well, he's both sometimes and neither. And that's kind of, where we are. So, I think I was reading a blog the other day that was talking about, how divisive we are, and instead of wondering whether Jesus was red or blue, Republican or Democrat, maybe instead we should ask the question simply, what would Jesus do? Well, and then it brought up Matthew 22, verses 37 through 40, which said, Jesus said to him, you shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your mind. This is the first and greatest commandment, and the second is like it, which means it's just as important, right? I mean, we put God first, but equally important here, Jesus is saying, you shall love your neighbor as yourself. On these two commandments hang all the law of the prophets. So, first commandment, love God with all that you have. And because you love God with all that you have, and we have Christ in us, the hope of glory, then the result is we will love our neighbors, even those that disagree with us. Bottom line, if we want to live like Jesus lived, then we have to love like Jesus loved. And Jesus just loved everybody. I don't know where Jesus would fall politically. I hear Republicans say Jesus was all about life. So if you're not pro-life, you can't, Christians would only vote pro-life. I hear people on the other talk about the environment and how in the creation story we're called to care for the earth, and how could a Christian not want to care for the earth? So we have to embrace a candidate that might be more in favor of environmental care, and everything goes back and forth. So I think when we try to get into that argument of, well, if you're really a Christian, you'll vote this red or you'll vote blue, because I think that's a dead-end street. And instead, I liked a sign. I saw a yard sign, and I also saw it on the internet, on a blog, and it was a little emblem with a red, white, and blue circle with red, white, and blue stars, and it said Jesus for 2020. Not Trump, not Biden, but Jesus for 2020. And I got to think of that. What would happen? Now, roll with me on this, okay? What would happen if we elected Jesus president of our country? Which means basically, because can't do that. But what if we said, Jesus, you are president of my life? And if Jesus is president, if Jesus is on the throne of my life, if Jesus has the steering wheel, as the song goes, if Jesus is truly Lord of my life, what would my life look like? How would I react? How would I live? How would I interchange with those that think differently from me? And so I'm running a new campaign here, and it's Jesus for President. Because I think if Jesus were truly president of our lives, then we would embrace all people, that we would love like Jesus loved. We having, Christ in us, having the love of God in us that transforms our life, and now full of this love, we are going to do all we can to love one another, to serve one another, to reach out to one another, to build bridges to one another. It's not going to be about us. It's going to be about what God calls us to do. And we remember the passage I talked about last week from 2 Chronicles. If my people who are called by my name, that's us, will humble themselves and pray and seek my face and turn from their wicked ways, then I will hear from heaven, forgive their sins, and heal their land. I mean, it's that humble part. Humble means, in this essence, God's on the throne of our life, not us. It's not about us. We often, I think, respond as if we are in charge, as if we are on the throne of our life. But what would happen if Jesus were president in 2020, 2021, 2022, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera? What if Jesus were really Lord of our lives, president, Lord? What would happen? How would that build bridges with people, even those that think differently than us? I don't think, I have an opinion. I have a political stance, but I feel compelled to embrace everybody. And then I ask questions to try to understand somebody else's viewpoint. And I want to show empathy, try to do my best to embrace them and to understand their opinion as best as I can, even if I may never have walked in their shoes. But the big picture is we're to love one another. And that second commandment is like it, meaning it's just as important. Okay, it's not like loving God's the only thing that's important. They go together. And the big picture is to love God and love our neighbor. Then that means we accept one another, we reach out to one another, we listen to one another, we seek first to understand, then to be understood. And if we build these bridges and say, yeah, well, that's interesting, I don't agree with that, but, love you, man. Love you, sister. Okay. I think that's pretty cool. And I think that's really what we're called to do. It's not about building walls. It's not about saying, okay, you have to think like me. I have to think like you. It's just like, hey, we're from the perspective as Christians, we're just brothers and sisters together. And God's our Father, and we're the sons and daughters of our Heavenly Father, brothers and sisters together, Jesus Christ. And so instead of finding ways to divide us, why don't we find ways to build bridges and to just love people and to serve people and to say, hey, I may not embrace that, but hey, that's okay. We're going to move on, but let's move on together. You can go left, I can go right, I can go right, you can go left. That's cool. That's fine. And but we're still sisters and brothers together in the person of Jesus Christ. And we can they can still be our friends. We don't have to unfriend them on Facebook. We can just embrace them. And I think, remember the first presidential debate? It was so bad. 10 minutes into it, I just turned the stupid thing off. And as a result, I didn't watch the one that just occurred last week. I thought, man, I'm not going through that again. But, I checked in to all the news things and got the skinny on it. And, overall, the impression was it went pretty well. People were civil. People, Biden, Trump still expressing their differences and where they are, but it sounds like it went well. So hopefully that's just a sign of things to come, that we can, walk across the aisle. We can walk across our Facebook page and embrace people. We can't walk across the street and embrace somebody that has a different political sign in our front yard than others. We can't walk across the hallway at school or at work or wherever and just engage people. And because we have the love of God within us, love that accepts us just the way we are, the love that says, you don't deserve salvation, but I'm giving it to you. It's not free. It's not cheap. It is free, but it's not cheap, and it's not cheap grace. God paid for that grace with his life in the person of Jesus Christ, but because of what God's done who are we? We have no right to judge anybody because we all have sinned and fall short of the glory of God. So let's just, suck it up, step up, and let's move forward, and let's just do all we can to unify our nation. And I love that passage from Romans 12, 9 through 10. And this is from the Voice translation, just kind of a new one. It's a paraphrase, but it says this. Romans 12, 9, 10. Love others well, and don't behind a mask love authentically. Despise evil, pursue what is good, if your life depends on it. Live in true devotion to one another, loving each other as sisters and brothers. Be first to honor others by putting them first. I mean, I'm thinking, what would happen if we really poked holes into the darkness as the light of the world and truly sought to love others and honor them, especially those we disagree with? Man, I think that would start a domino effect of changing the world one person at a time. So, hey, thanks for tuning in today. Hey, if you haven't liked us, I hope you'll like us. I hope you'll share this with others that you think will appreciate this conversation. So this is PJ's Pondering / Ramblings. I hope you have an awesome week, but make sure, hey, voting day is a week from tomorrow. Make sure you tune in and do your civic duty. I love you. God loves you. And have a blessed week. Take care.